So in the investigation that you just completed, what you should have looked at are these 8 string functions. And so basically I wanted you to take a look at them, see how they work, and see if you can figure out what exactly they do. All of these use that same dot and then the function name with 2 parentheses afterwards. You're going to notice as we continue that that's very, very popular in computer science. But what I did here was I basically went through and I print the original message to the screen, just have it generically on top, and then I go through and I test out all of the different functions. So just to kind of give you a feel of what the output of this is going to look like. If we look at them one at a time, so here if I run it, running the capitalized function, so here it says, okay, function 1 is capitalized, and what I'm doing here is I have my message of welcome to Intro to Computer Science saved inside of this string variable name. Then I'm taking my string variable name dot capitalized with 2 parentheses at the end, and I'm saving this result or this change inside of test string. And then what I'm doing is I'm printing test string to the screen. And so here's our original message, and here's the capitalized function. And what you should be noticing is that the capitalized function takes this original message and then prints the first letter to be capital, so that W, and then from there, lowercases everything else. So that's what our capitalized function does, is it leaves the first letter capital or rewrites it so the first letter is capital and then everything else is lowercase. Now if I move my comment down a little bit, I'm going to run this again and now I'm going to include the lower. So notice here I went through the same exact process. I have message dot lower and then I have the quote or the parentheses and then I'm printing that out to the screen. So here, if we run this, again, you see our original message. This is what happened when we applied capitalized to it. This is what happens when we apply lower function to it. So what this does is it takes the entire function, whatever was entered, it changes everything to a lowercase letter, and it saves that inside of here, it's test string. So it basically rewrites that function with all lowercase letters. So those are our first 2 string functions here. The first is the capitalized, and it returns a copy of the string with only the first character capitalized, making sure that you're saving it somewhere like we did here. We saved it inside of test string. And then lower does kind of the same thing, but it saves the new one inside of test string here, but this one makes all the items lowercase, unlike capitalized where it makes everything but the first letter lowercase. So they work in slightly different ways. Just kind of keeping that in mind. That's how capitalize and lower work. Now from here, I'm going to go a little bit further, and hopefully you're already making an educated guess on what upper does. But if we run upper, what you will notice is that it takes that string, whatever it was, and it changes every letter to the uppercase letter. So you can see here that it changes everything to uppercase, and then it saves it inside of test string to print it to the screen. Then if we move down to title, this one is kind of similar to the ones up above. It changes the string ever so slightly. And this one, if you look, it prints it basically like a book title, hence why it's called title. And it saves the string so that, or rewrites the string and then saves it in test string so that every single first character is capitalized. So if I go down to my next slide here, upper returns a copy of the string in all uppercase letters, and title returns a copy of the string with the first letter in each word capitalized. So that's how our first 4 work. Capitalized function has first letter capitalized, everything else lower. The lowercase function, or the lower function, makes everything lowercase. Upper makes everything uppercase. And title function makes the first letter of every word, so basically the first character after a space, capitalized. So that's how those first four work. And notice that every single time I'm saving it inside of test string, or saving it somewhere so that I can then print that change to the screen. Now what we're going to look at next are the count and the find function. And I'm going to do those simultaneously. I'm going to change my comments there. This one, we're going to count. Notice how, unlike the other 4 here where we just had an open and a closed parenthesis, this one actually takes in a string. So we're going to count OM, and here we're going to find OM. And I want to talk about the slight differences that occur between the 2. So here, if I run this program, here we go, what we see is the count function returns a 2. So what this is actually doing is it's looking at our original function, and we're going to count, we put in a string here of OM. So what your program is doing when it uses the count function with OM in the middle is it goes in and it says OM, there's 1. Keeps looking, keeps looking, keeps looking. OM, there's 2. Keeps looking, keeps looking, keeps looking, and it's counting how many times the string lowercase o, lowercase m appears in that string. So it's basically looking for what's called a substring. Then from here, the find function. Notice how this one is a 4, so it's not counting anything. But the find function goes in and it goes, okay, I'm looking, I'm looking, I'm looking. Oh, I found OM here. And it goes, okay, the index at the beginning of that OM is 0, 1, 2, 3. 4 is the index value of where that first OM appears. Notice how it doesn't look for a second one or a third one. It looks for the first one and then returns the index location of that. That's your next set of notes here. The count finds a substring and tells you how many times it appears. And then the find actually goes in and returns the first position of the index of where that substring starts in your string. So notice how it works slightly differently. Find actually returns a location, and count tells you how many times it appears. Okay, the next one is our center. This one works a little bit differently as well. So this one's a little confusing to look at first, but you'll notice that it takes that original string and it centers it with the 200. So I'm going to explain that on the next slide. Just don't look here just yet. So the center, it says, if placed inside of a print statement, this function will center the string in a given width. So that centers it in a width of 200. Okay, so you can see that it moved it a little bit. We could change that, maybe make it 500, and it'll center it over 500. So if we do that, you'll notice, there we go. So if I make this a little bit bigger, you can see, okay, it centers over 200 characters, centers over 500 characters. If I wanted to do a little bit less, so maybe I should change this to 20 characters, I can run it here. And it's already about 20 characters long, so it would go only that far. So basically, it centers it over that many characters. So you can pick and choose if you want your print statements to be moved around. Center is a good way to do that. And then lastly, the replace function. I'm sure you already have an educated guess of what this one does, but if we run it, what you will see is that it takes that string and it replaces all the lowercase OMs with the uppercase OMs. So you can see that slight change is happening there. We're actually taking in an upper or lowercase OMs and we're taking them and we're changing them and then we're resaving it. So that replace function, it takes in an old substring and a new substring, and then from there it replaces with the new substring. So you can now figure out how these might be useful to you. Depending on your program, it might be helpful, say, to change everything to lowercase or uppercase or something like that so that you don't have to worry about people entering it in with different cases, because as you've realized, Python is case sensitive, so it does in fact matter if it's upper or lowercase. So just kind of keep that in check. Keep these in your back pocket as you work and move through different exercises that deal with